Now, while we think about how we can sustain quality journalism in the advance of technology, it's also important to remember that in the end, somewhere, somehow, someone has to make ends meet in order for quality journalism to stay around, to be sustainable. And that is a very big challenge, especially in these times where technologies are making a lot of things easier and cheaper, but are also challenging the industry. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Welcome to Following the Money Trail, innovative revenue models in challenging times.
Money talks, and journalism is listening. Digital transformation keeps upending the way we finance content. Can journalists uncover innovative and sustainable revenue models for their trade? How do new developments in AI impact the media landscape? Dive into Following the Money Trail, innovative revenue models in challenging times.
And I'm very happy to discuss this with a very high-level panel of experts that will hopefully answer some of the most difficult questions when it comes to revenue models in today's day and time. Let's welcome co-founder and executive director of SembraMedia, Janine Warner. Editor-in-chief of the General-Anzeiger, a local newspaper from Bonn, Helge Matthiesen. And the CEO of the Hindu Group in India, Navaneeth. Welcome. All right, so I would like to start by addressing the status quo, where we are right now. Now, Janine, I'd like to start with you because you literally work with hundreds of media organizations across Latin America, Spain, the US, and Canada. What are the main challenges, from your perspectives, digital publishers face when trying to find sustainable revenue models?
Well, first I have to say it's never easy these days to build a sustainable model. We saw the traditional model disrupted, and the new ones are being very creative in how they seek out new ways. But people often ask me, what's the recipe for success? And I have to say there's no clear recipe, but we're starting to recognize some of the ingredients. Audience engagement, relying not solely on advertising and subscription, but also finding other types of revenue sources through consulting, through services, through specialized newsletters and things like that. So we're starting to see some glimmers of new forms of revenue that might help replace some of the lost ones. But I always have to start by saying it's not easy for anyone.
It would be very nice, and a very short panel if it was. Thank you very much, Janine. Now, Navaneeth, when we talk about these challenges, you would think that it mostly implies smaller, maybe starting up companies, but of course it also hits the big players like the Hindu Group. What do you identify as your most pressing issue when it comes to financing?
Thanks for having me. And the problems are equally big for larger organizations because larger organizations are slow to move. To give you context, we are a 144-year-old news media organization, highly respected. The transition from physical to digital is a big challenge. To get the digital strategy right is a challenge. To build a culture of experimentation, both in newsrooms and in business, those are works in progress. So I would say making money from the digital products to offset organic decline in the physical business is a big challenge.
I am sure you also agree, Helge. Now, the General-Anzeiger, Bonn's local newspaper, is part of a group that recently relaunched its digital strategy as part of all the publishing or the publications of the group. What did that relaunch of the digital strategy mean for your finances?
Now we are happy that we are on money with digital things around that. All these things I can agree with. It's a great challenge, and we have to change everything in the journalistic work and the organization of the whole company, of the newsroom and all that. We do a lot around that, and we try to build up groups of subscribers in our digital business. And nowadays we don't earn enough money with them, but we are trying to extend all that business, for we know that print won't have a future.
Now that's, I would say, a stark contrast to the Hindu group, Navaneeth. If I understood it correctly, the group as a whole still heavily relies on ad sales and on classic newspaper sales. How does that affect the possibility to even push forward new revenue models when maybe in the structure or in the company people say, why should we change this if our classic model is still working?
India in general, in our case in particular, print is good. Print is profitable, circulation is stable, advertising is good. But audiences are moving. Younger audiences are moving to digital, and if you don't recognize that, it's a problem. So this is more to future-proof our business. And the job of business is to make our journalism succeed. And our journalism succeeds if it's more accessible. It creates impact and influence to larger audience. I think our editors buy into that mission, and generally there's a consensus and a lot of effort to move towards digital, even as you protect print revenues.
When you say it has to be more accessible, do you also mean free of charge? Because, of course, that's the very big question. Should the content be paid for by the people who are receiving the news?
Yeah, I should offer an Indian context here. India is one of the lowest cover price markets in the world. For instance, we are among the most expensive newspapers in the country. We probably sell at a cover price of 10 cents. So the industry has been built with a focus on advertisers, not necessarily readers. And we don't want to make the same mistake with the digital ecosystem. If you put a small price on yourself, you don't expect the world to solve your problems. So we have a metered paywall. We are very bullish about digital subscriptions. We have been at it for the last 4 or 5 years, and I would say with a certain amount of modesty, extremely successful.
So just to be clear, if I understood you two, you rely when it comes to digital on a classic subscription model where people pay a monthly price in order to get their content, right? Okay, that's the way you two are going for now. Janine, I would like to talk about a survey that you conducted in 2021, which determined that on average, almost a third of the income of digital entrepreneur media came from grants. And it was the main source of income for the bigger part of them. Is that the way to go then? Should it not be subscriptions, but rather grants or somehow other types of funding?
So thank you for reading our Inflection Point report. I should qualify that by saying we took a real focus on socially impactful media. So the fact that so many of them relied on grants also corresponds to the fact that they tend to be the kind of media that operate in very difficult markets, Cuba, Venezuela, pieces like that, and have to rely on grants for that. That said, after doing tons of research, we've identified kind of 5 general ways that they make money: grants, advertising, reader support, consulting services, and this other category that's sometimes hard to describe without examples. So grants are important, but we tell all media leaders to diversify their revenue sources, to make sure they have multiple sources of revenue, not be overly reliant either on grants or on advertising or on any single source. And even if you have grants, to have multiple funders so that you can maintain your independence.
Let's make it a little bit more concrete. When you say consultancy services, I have a small newspaper, say, what do I do? What kind of consultancy should I do?
So I'll give you a couple examples that I enjoy. One that's been wildly successful comes from Brazil. It's called Jota. And they recognized that the legal industry was not being covered well. Laws change. This has great impact on businesses. And they came up with a model where they have a public-facing free website with the latest in legal changes and precedents. And then they have highly tailored newsletters, very specific to business interests, that can help you stay on top of the laws that might cost you money in the future. And they charge a premium for those newsletters and earn millions in US dollars equivalent. In another extremely different model, there's a little tiny site in South America called Ciencia del Sur, the Science of the South. And 2 journalists got together with a bunch of scientists, and they do what I like to call journalistic interpretation. So they take these highly complex scientific papers and they translate them in ways that the average human can understand. And they've monetized their work through the science ministry and other organizations that want to support them. But they also do things like lead community groups through training, take people on bird walking trips and charge for that. So some of the more creative solutions are actually providing enough revenue that a small organization with just a few journalists can earn enough to keep publishing. And I find it quite inspiring.
That is really inspiring. Of course, that also in a way suggests that the publication is a little bit specialized. When we talk about the more general media that is around in the classic media, Helge, in Germany, for example, we have publicly funded media that is also online. How do you deal with that if you are charging for content, considering that there are many publicly funded organizations that are offering the content free of charge?
We want to be independent, and we want to be independent from any public money. That's very important. It's the second strong column of free press in Germany, these local newspapers. The Bonner General-Anzeiger is one of it. We have in Germany other newspapers, local newspapers. Our problem is that we will always have a local market we have to work with. So the possibility to go into other fields, I know a newspaper like we are in Osnabrück selling horses. I know others selling boats. So there are some with ideas like that. But our normal business is local information. And so we have always a small market, and but we have high costs on doing all the technique we need to be online, to be on the platforms. And that's the problem we have, and the problem we have to solve with. And so we are happy that we have print readers. They pay a lot more on the information than the digital readers do. But we have to transform these readers, for we know this number will go down very clearly. It's going down. So we have let's say 5 to 10 to 15 years to change this model. If we don't succeed, there will be no independent local press anymore, or something else, something very different from what it's now.
That, however, poses a big challenge because I have the impression that not everyone knows how to actually do that transition and how to get the money out of the online subscribers, if you will. In the case of The Hindu, what is your strategy, or what is your vision on how you're going to get more people to pay for the online content?
So we have a fairly robust number of subscribers, and it's growing. Out of we run 4 products, 4 different titles, but out of our portfolio, more than half the subscriptions come for the e-paper, which is the physical replica, digital replica of the physical paper, and this is not skewed towards any age group. Young people, middle-aged people, elderly people, all of them consume the e-paper, and this is unique to some parts of the world. And our interpretation is while the internet has enabled unlimited choice, it burdens you with unlimited noise as well. So a section of readers who are saying, I would like to consume a news product within a finite period of time with a beginning and an end, and I trust your editors to curate that product for me, so I'll pay for that. When you construct a newspaper, we operate in multiple markets. We publish 16 editions a day. The basis of segmentation for the physical newspaper is geography. You start with geography, then layer areas of interest, put back geography again in terms of local sports, local business, etc. But the way an editor constructs a physical newspaper, it's for the lowest common denominator. Whatever your target audience is, it should make sense to most of your audiences. What we have done with the digital product is we are able to straddle 2 extremes in terms of additional content. We do hyperlocal, and we do serious areas like tech and science and climate, which wouldn't find space in the physical newspaper. So you're able to do hyperlocal, and you're able to do topics that are of interest to 10 to 15% of audience, but they're 100% interested in that. That has allowed us to create more news, save on newsprint costs, and create value for the e-paper products. That is a trend that is growing, and our ambition is also global. We want to engage with the world and help the world make sense of India, and also help the world look at the world through an Indian prism, which is important. To that end, we are launching an international edition starting July 1st, which will be a daily product, curated as an e-paper, which will help the world make sense of India. And I think that's one of the ways we will expand our subscription business to geographies outside India.
So I'm picking up, diversify the sources of income, realize that the classic way will not pay off in the long run, and also find your strengths on what makes you special and gives you an advantage towards other specialists, and what else can you earn money with actually. So it's actually the revenue model is finding things that are not necessarily related to the news or the publishing themselves necessarily. I do want to talk about grants because I wonder, Janine, if you know of strategies in order for publications to receive more grants. Where can they start? If someone is lost or about to go bankrupt and they say, maybe there is someone there who can help me, what would you advise them to do?
Sure. Well, grants are a vital part of media, especially, as I mentioned, in countries like Central America, where it's harder and harder to build any kind of business model, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, where the economy really doesn't favor that. They have to get grants from this kind of community, and Europe should be paying more attention to Latin American media in that way. How they find them? Going to events and making personal connections is always the best way, but that's a luxury that many of them don't get to enjoy. If you're watching this online and you're looking for a source, one of the best that I recommend is at GFMD, the Global Forum for Media Development, has a whole section on grants, and they keep that really nicely updated. They have a little bit of a European focus, but also look at other parts of the world. And in the US based, there's a site called IJNet, IJNET.com, that's run by the International Center for Journalists, that has a newsletter with grant opportunities every week sent to your inbox, divided by different regions of the country. So keep an eye on opportunities. A lot of foundations change their priorities year to year. A lot of them set very specific deadlines for application. So knowing when they're due and getting a head start on them, it's very hard to do a grant application the night before. It's not something to procrastinate.
Definitely not. We cannot ignore the elephant in the room, which is artificial intelligence. It is part of this discussion. Helge, in your case, in your media group, I am sure it has to be a topic of discussion. What do you see when you look ahead?
A lot of good opportunities to use AI. I think we do a lot of work which is just putting data from one place to the other place, reading things and making news from it. And if you use AI, just think about football games or something like that. You have 5 data and you have AI which creates you a news text. So there are a lot of opportunities you can use it. If we use this as a tool and we use it intelligent, I think there are more chances than problems with it, for we will have more time to invest in quality journalism, and I think that's the key to everything. That's the only thing we can sell is journalism of a high quality. That's the only thing people are willing to pay for.
That's the perspective about the content that you can create with AI, but what about the revenue models? Have you thought about how artificial intelligence can help you sell better, for example?
We are thinking about all this. We are not far enough with it to talk about it, but of course we will do. We have to use it as a tool to make our business, to make a better business and to earn more money out of journalism, for that's important. Grants is not, I don't think it's a good model for German journalism. I think I have 80, 90 people in the newsroom and they want their money, they have their families, they want to pay their houses, and so it's a good idea, maybe in other countries. Here we need a very stable model, a business model.
Very quickly, what about, or I don't know if you want to, I mean, that's why we have different perspectives. That's the entire idea.
I would simply say it's much harder to replace the extraordinary revenue of a big traditional media than to develop a new media with a small staff. But in the US, there's a huge trend to turn for-profit daily newspapers into non-profits. There are a lot of people raising money to try and bring that kind of philanthropic and possibly government funding into
Maybe
those.
in 10 years I have another idea about that.
As we say in Spanish, vamos a ver. We'll see.
We'll see. I would also like to ask you about your perspective and the discussions at the Hindu for artificial intelligence and what it means for the revenue models.
There's a bunch of things we experiment on the revenue side because the cost of failure is a lost business opportunity and you learn. But we're extremely guarded with the application of artificial intelligence to our content. I believe currently the models are evolving there. Especially the generative models are prone to hallucination. I think it's a good use case for summaries. Beyond that, so we're experimenting with it with a lot of responsibility. I think there are a few use cases, but I don't see artificial intelligence replacing natural intelligence available in the newsroom. If anything, it can be an aid to increase efficiency and liberate journalists from mundane tasks and focus on what they do brilliantly. Currently, it's an experiment. We don't use it heavily, and if and when we use it, we'll call it out.
Janine, from your perspective, my question, do you think news organizations are prepared for what's coming?
No, obviously not. But we're all trying, for sure. I think maybe a use of artificial intelligence that people haven't talked about yet, and a contrast to your subscription model. Most of the media in our world favor membership, which is more about give what you can, get it for free if you can't. Don't limit everybody to the same level. Let them contribute thousands of dollars if they can, or pennies if they can't. But those kinds of membership drives are really labor intensive. And a lot of media start out naively thinking that their audience is going to support them. And we find that actually 0.03% of your most loyal readers, not your total readership, are likely to actually give you money in a membership drive. And the more tailored and specific your message to them is about how their support helps you, the more likely they are. And you almost have to do it more than most journalists feel comfortable. The best advice of most membership programs is asked all the time, and most journalists feel like we shouldn't ask for money. So I think there might be an opportunity with AI to start thinking about how to customize those marketing messages, to start thinking about how to better understand what motivates our audience and engages them with our content. And maybe there are some ways that we can try and balance the avalanche of content that's coming at us with more tailored messages and more specific appeals to the audiences we are engaging well.
Thank you very much for that. I am sure you also have questions, so I would like to open up the opportunity for you to ask them. I'm seeing Rona there. I know her from a panel a few years ago. Welcome again to the Global Media Forum, Rona.
Thank you very much. What's interesting is even if you sit on a panel, you also learn here. My quick question is for Janine. My name is Rona Maya and I'm a journalist. In your work, you've revealed that teams that are, media houses that are co-founded by teams of men and women generate more revenue. Are there any other demographical factors that you can share that helps with revenue? Thanks.
I love that question because it lets me tell you the other statistic that I'm always amazed by is the high number of women founders of these media. In our research in Latin America, we found that 38% of the founders of more than 1,100 media are women. That is incomparable to the ownership of television and news, which is often less than 1% female. In Europe, where we recently did research on our Project Oasis, where we built another media directory for 43 countries in Europe, we found 58% women leadership. But we did look at how does that affect revenue. And most of these organizations are founded by 2 or more journalists. It's the typical thing. A couple of journalists get together, start writing a blog, and the next thing they know, they have a media organization. So diverse teams in terms of men and women seem to work better. But the more important finding, I think, to share is that diverse skill sets are vital. So a lot of what we try to teach these wonderful, well-intentioned journalists is that they need to diversify their teams to be more than just journalists and editors. Somebody has to know sales. Somebody has to know business development. And OMG, don't forget the accountant.
Definitely. Good tip. Write that down. Don't forget the accountant. Any further questions? I'm seeing another hand there. Okay, and maybe here. Oh, in the back. Just in the back, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm sitting here listening to you talking about media having to sell horses and boats and doing bird watching tours and something. And my feeling is, as inspiring as that is and as creative, it really gives me an uncomfortable feeling, because I think, if you want to go to a restaurant and you want to eat Asian, and then you have an option where a restaurant focuses on Asian, and they also maybe another one does pizza and the best noodles and some Asian, I would always go to the one that does Asian, because I think, okay, they do the one thing and they do it good. And this is true in my feeling for media. I think it takes away some sort of credibility if you have to do lots of different things in order to do your actual work of journalism. So my question to you is, do we need to look at a bigger solution. It's fine to discuss these individual ideas and creative ways of finding revenues, but my feeling is there might be a need for a bigger discussion looking at regulation and things that we've been discussing. So is it enough to be creative as an individual media outlet?
Is your question for anyone in particular? Because you mentioned the horses.
I think an uncomfortable feeling is not the most. It's true. We must have an uncomfortable feeling, for there's a big transformation, and it's a question we have to give back to the society. We as journalists must find ways to make the people pay for journalism, to give them a feeling that the money they give for it is worth it, and that's the great challenge. And if you see the numbers you can get from digital journalism here in Germany, it's not enough at the moment. We are very, very successful in growing numbers. We have 10,000 new subscriptions during the last 2 years. That's a number I've never seen during my career over 20 years. But they don't pay enough. So that's the great challenge, to make the people pay. And the society has to answer whether it wants free journalism and free local journalism. That's the part I can talk about here.
Could I add to that?
Very briefly, because we're running out of time, but very briefly.
Yeah, so long as one keeps journalism at the center and finds adjacencies in areas like education, schools, colleges, events that are close to your purpose, because I often think media reports problems very well. Media should be seen as part of the solution, and events are a great way to do that. So long as journalism is central and you're able to find revenue adjacencies, I think we'll all do ourselves a big favor.
One last thing, I can't take any other questions, just got the order, but you can briefly...
Just quickly, I would say, I share your concern. I hate to see a journalist distracted by their side hustle. The best ones are very aligned with your journalism, like Jota selling newsletters about legal issues and covering the law. They're not starting amusement parks and maintaining the same credibility in the world that I work in. So the more aligned, the better.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I'm sorry for not being able to take in more questions, but I do think that this was incredibly useful. That's what was my goal, is our goal, and I thank you very much for giving us all your perspectives and your very valuable knowledge.
Thank you for being such a great moderator.
Thank you.